Good afternoon, and welcome to our celebration of Eva Brann's life. I'm Nora Diemleitner, the president of St. John's College. I am gratified to see so many of you here in the Great Hall in Annapolis, and I know many more have joined us this afternoon on live stream. Let me especially welcome former chair of the Board of Visitors and Governors, Sharon Bishop, former Santa Fe president, Mike Peters, and his wife, Eleanor, former Annapolis president, Chris Nelson, and current board member, Tia Posick, and also Grace Cavalieri, Maryland's 10th Poet Laureate. Many of you here today are members of the St. John's community, tutors and members of our staff and administration, students and alumni. Even though at the college we think of Eva's life as centered around us, whether in Santa Fe or in Annapolis, she had a broad group of friends and admirers from all walks of life and all around the globe, with whom she corresponded and visited regularly. And I'm delighted that together we're able to share this special afternoon. Eva gave us many wonderful years to prepare us for today's gathering. It is our opportunity to create a living memory of her for the current and the next generation. Eva's story, after all, is also the story of St. John's College and the program which Eva helped shape and which also shaped her. I'm no friend of memorials, but I found myself strangely looking forward to today. Perhaps it was Joan Silver's guiding hand that assured me the collage of memories and tributes that we'd be hearing this afternoon would shed light on facets of Eva's life I didn't know about, would illuminate more of her prolific writings, and make us together smile fondly and wistfully. We will shed tears too, I am certain, but we can rest in the firm belief that Eva's life was well lived, that it was a well-examined life. Eva personified her teaching and the creed of St. John's. The great books and the college changed her life's trajectory and ours. Much was special about Eva, and that was obvious to me from the very first time I met her. At my job interview, both of us masked. It was still COVID. We disagreed on a few matters, some of you may even remember, yet throughout the conversation, that special sparkle in her eye that so many of us will probably remark upon today felt reassuring and comforting. Over the last few years, I had the privilege of spending time with her, whether on the couch in her sitting room surrounded by her books, on the last few months upstairs sitting on her bed. I felt a special bond. One of Eva's truly unique abilities was to give each of us this very sense that we had a special bond, a special relationship. I learned of Eva's love for toddlers and young children and how much she wanted a daycare on our campus. We talked about our fathers, who we both adored and worried about not having them treated quite well enough. But we could rest in the firm belief that they loved us and were proud of us. There was a major difference between our fathers. I am quite certain mine didn't talk to me about Kant when I was 5. It was a special moment when she said something in German to me. A few times, I wasn't sure whether Eva pulled my leg or was truly serious, and I plan to find out today. Did she really not like Shakespearean tragedies? And what about her statement that she could do without poetry? Apologies, Grace. I already missed my visits with her, but I'm comforted by the thought that today's tributes and her writings will bring her yet closer, not just to me, but to all of us. We're all indebted to Joan Silver, who came to St. John's as a student because of Eva. She tirelessly and with great care and thought put together today's program. I am deeply grateful to Chris Nelson, who was a rookie president, he says himself, during Eva's tenure as dean, and to Steve Crockett, who together managed Eva's affairs, always with her well-being front of mind. Heather Latham, during her years in the dean's office, had the most wonderful relationship with Eva and assured that she was kept abreast of any developments at the college. V. Abidou took loving care of Eva during the last few months of her life. I also want to thank our dean, Susie Paulman, and her assistant, Paul Harlan White, for all their work in making today's event a reality. Nick Bruce, Sarah Llewell, and Mike Jordan also contributed. It is truly a college event. Let me now turn the program over to Joan Silver, who will lay the foundation for today's special tributes and memories.
I think I might need some water, so I'll start here. I first met Eva at dinner at a college president's house when I was 19. Within a few years, when I was entering St. John's as a freshman, Eva approached me saying, "Joni, I have great news for you. You are in my math class." I told her about this later at a lunch, and she said, "No, I didn't," and burst into laughter. She thought it was hilarious, as it was. She gave me the first offer I couldn't refuse a couple of years later, reading Hegel's Phenomenology with her in her kitchen. The trip I'm about to mention was the second offer I couldn't refuse. But I'm not going to talk about that trip as part of the long journey of my friendship with Eva. Rather, I want to share what I learned then and later as backdrop for what you will hear from the other speakers. It is a part of Eva's story which is usually not told. Glimpses of her childhood, family, life in Nazi Germany, and some of its after effects on her and on her life here. Knowing these beginnings deepened my friendship with Eva. What follows then are my memories of her memories. Eva first told me of her family's escape from Germany amid a cross-country trip we were taking together from Annapolis to Santa Fe in 1977. She was going to teach in Santa Fe for the summer, and I was returning home to the San Francisco Bay Area to teach at a college there. At dinner one evening, for once not at the McDonald's we enjoyed frequenting, she revealed that she, her mother, and her brother took a train out of Germany in April 1941, having finally been permitted by the Nazi authorities to leave. Eva was 12, her brother 9. Her father, an internationally known physician, had been in the United States on Kristallnacht, and that was November 9th, 1938. The family called and told him to stay, not to return to Germany. Her mother spent the next 2.5 years working to get herself and her 2 children out of Germany. Eva treasured her childhood. She was protected and loved. 3 adults were prominent in her memory: her mother, her father, and Lisbeth, her nanny. Nora stole something from me, you'll see as I go on. Eva was the apple of her father's eye. For one thing, he loved her intellect, which matched his in care and scope. He would take her to the local park, holding his daughter, the future physician, by the hand. I think Eva was about 5, so Nora did verify one of the things I wanted to say. There they would sit, and he would tell her what he was learning about Kant from a friend. Eva claimed to have understood nothing. As Eva walked to school, I now see her as about 8, she was taunted by other children for being Jewish. Frightened while this was happening, Eva, upon returning home to her mother, felt safe, protected. Eva sometimes accompanied her mother on visits to the Nazi authorities. She watched her use her looks. She was pretty, Eva said, to move their case forward. But when I asked Eva toward the end of her life how her mother had succeeded in getting them out, she said she gave them every piece of paper they wanted. One summer, shortly after coming to the U.S., Eva attended a work camp. The children were, as she said, bringing in the harvest, peas and beans. There she met Frenchie, another Jewish refugee, but from Austria through France, and thus her name. Frenchie was just Eva's age. The two became, in Eva's words, fast friends, and continued such for the rest of Frenchie's life. Eva would visit Frenchie and her family, her husband and their 2 sons, in Baltimore on weekends. Eva helped raise the boys. She and Frenchie sometimes took them camping. Eva was in Greece working as an archaeologist when she got the call. Her brother, Billy, for William, had killed himself. There was a story of a broken heart, but also all around his room, drawings of SS officers and Nazi airplanes. When he was a young boy, 5 or 6, I think, her parents had been called to take him home from school. He had stood on his desk and done a particularly good imitation of Hitler delivering a speech to the nation. They, as a family, listened to Hitler's speeches on the radio. Billy loved his American name. He had been Wolfgang in Germany, was a crack shot. He had fought in the Korean War, and, as Eva said, was the gifted one in the family. She felt his loss keenly. A year or more before she died, she wondered what ages they might be if they met in an afterlife. Closer to her death, Eva began to think often of her nanny, Lisbeth. With Eva from her birth, Lisbeth ate, slept, played, and I suppose read, first with Eva and then with Eva and her brother in the nursery, until the Nazi authorities forbade non-Jews to work for Jews. Eva admired the courage of this loving presence who continued to visit the family every week. After the war, Eva went back to Germany to find Lisbeth. When she learned from the corner grocer that Lisbeth had been killed in an Allied air raid, Eva packed her bags and left. So Eva left Germany behind. It took only this one trip back for Eva to embrace fully her life in the United States. She would say of it, "I discovered I was an American." And so, on our way cross-country, we stopped, not only, as Eva had planned, at many spots that memorialized Abraham Lincoln, but at many McDonald's, which Eva also prized as quintessentially American.
Consider the following words of praise. There is first her remarkable logical, or better, dialectical force, her ability to discern distinctions, to divide at the joints, to collect with completeness, in short, to articulate the world in words ready for reflection. And then, finally, there is the felicity of her language. Everyone recognizes it, and I'd give much to discover its essence. But that irresistible effort never gets beyond a mere description, which is therefore the best I can do. Her style is to literature what the classical style is to music. Perfectly flowing and yet pithy, perfectly correct while alive with novelty, unquote. You ask, who is it who captured so well the perfection of Eva's thought and prose? The answer is Eva herself. In writing about the perfections of Jane Austen, whose novels Eva loved to read and reread, I find it remarkable that Eva managed to capture our imaginations in just such a way while being purely original at the same time. I will speak to her time as dean. When I returned to the college in 1991, Eva was my teacher in those early years of my tenure, and while she was dean, shared with me such bon mot as we've become used to, all of which she lived by and many of which were later captured in one of her books published by Paul Dry. And I'd like you to imagine the voice belonging to this wise and mischievous woman next to me. A dean should be worldly as hell, so as to serve as a buffer between properly inward-turned faculty and that potently intrusive fantasy called reality. Try to be both motor and soul. Work to keep the place serviceably purring as well as nobly animated. Small slips should be admitted with stupefying alacrity. Big mistakes should be mitigated by the most industrious generosity. Truth-telling in office. Suppress all remarks. Candor is ill-advised. Truthfulness is of the essence. It's impossible to tell the whole truth because time runs out, memory fails, kindness modifies, and confidentiality abridges the story. Nor is it possible to tell nothing but the truth, since tact always stretches verity into verisimilitude. One rule is plain: tell no self-serving lies. Try for prudence, the virtue of purpose-led good sense that puts principle into practice without much intervening theory, the royal lesson of the Republic. Odysseus, the man of many mechanisms and long patience, is a dean's natural model. Readiness, even some relish for listening to tales, and resourcefulness in resolving imbroglios. My hero has another facility which I leave unmentioned. Getting things done means curtailed deliberation and ill-founded decision. Why on earth does it tend to work? And finally, here is Eva speaking about the college she so loved, that animated her sense of duty in office and in the classroom. We need not be abashed to think that we're working at the world's veritable center. We need to keep earning our sense of working at the source of intellectual life, of having realized in this tiny community a way of learning that seems to others like a utopia. Utopia means no place, but here we are, an actual place, and what's more, a place of considerable consequence in the cause of liberal learning. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Robin Shalleck Janis. I was a student of Eva's and lucky enough to have become her friend. I'm just going to tell you now a reminiscence of one of my visits with Eva when she came to visit my husband and me in Greece. The first time I heard Eva Brann speak, I wanted to know her. Happily, that was not difficult. Among a faculty that makes itself available to students, Eva was even more accessible than most. She once wrote, "Our students can ask us anything, and do." Somehow, as an eager freshman, I found the nerve to stop Eva on campus and ask, how can a student get to know a tutor? She suggested tea. Tea in my tiny Campbell dorm room was awkward, to say the least. But it broke the ice, and thus began a friendship that lasted 50 years. After I graduated and went back to New York, I met George, who brought me to the Greek island of Kythera, where he had family. Kythera is a beautiful island, remote and practically untouched by tourism. When Eva came to visit, she loved it right away, saying that it reminded her of the old Greece, the Greece she had known as a young archaeologist in the Athens Agora. To our delight, Eva returned nearly every summer, calling her voyage to Kythera an annual idyll. I had to look up idyll in the dictionary. It was an idyll for us, too. One spring, Eva came just as the wild poppies had finished blooming. Their petals had blown away in the wind, leaving their naked pods heavy with seed. I naturally thought of the Homeric simile that Eva had translated so beautifully. And like a poppy, he let fall his head to one side, a poppy that is in a garden, laden with fruit and the showers of spring. So he bowed to one side his head, made heavy with helmet. I said something about the soldier with a helmet-heavy head, but Eva had a different thought. "These poppies are full of seeds," she said. "Let's bake with them." When Eva and I were in the kitchen together, it was always an adventure. Eva liked to say that we were cooking up a storm. The results were best, of course, when we had a real cook like Cece Dry in the kitchen with us. But no matter how the meal turned out, it was always fun to cook with Eva. Over the years, the people in our village got to know Eva. They admired her energy, knowing that she set out early every morning on a long walk across the valley. One elderly neighbor, perhaps a little envious, asked if my friend had ever been married. When I said no, she gave a satisfied little snort. "Well," she said, "that explains it. No achos." I had to laugh. The word achos is used casually in modern Greek to mean stress. In Homeric moments, Eva wrote that achos is the grief sound we hear in the name Achilles. I realized how apt my neighbor's observation was. Eva had no achos. In fact, I have never known anyone less angst-ridden, less dwelling on pain and anguish, less given to fury and resentment. In short, less like Achilles than Eva. Even on vacation, Eva kept to a schedule. Every morning she'd wake up early and write in bed, always by hand on long sheets of yellow legal paper. Some of you have seen those pages. When her work was done, she'd come upstairs and spend some leisure time with us. After lunch, Eva would stand up and announce that she was going to her room to read the Bible. That, of course, meant she was going to take a nap. In Homeric moments, Eva wrote about the way Athena could change Odysseus' appearance, making him look younger for his meeting with Nausicaa, taller and stronger for his reunion with Penelope. Transformations can occur, Eva said, even without divine intervention. Quote, "Nothing happens to Odysseus that does not happen to us all. We too glow and crumble and have our alternating moments. Even in our world, these transformations are wonderful." When I read that, it reminded me of something that had happened when Eva and George and I were visiting our favorite site, the ruined Byzantine city of Palaiochora. The approach was narrow and steep, and we had to pick our way carefully among loose stones. Coming to a difficult spot, George reached back and gave Eva his hand. Just at that moment, I looked up, and the thought occurred to me that George looked different, somehow glowing, transformed in the evening sun. But I couldn't stand there gazing. They were moving ahead, and I had to watch my footing. So I looked down again, keeping my eyes on the backs of Eva's feet in their neat blue sneakers as I tried to follow her footsteps along the path. When I told Eva about this episode, she was especially happy because she was just then writing about transformations of that kind, and she needed a real-life example. Whenever possible, I would accompany Eva on her walks, and as we walked, we talked, sometimes about what to cook for dinner or where to take a drive, sometimes about what we were reading, and sometimes we talked about people we both cared about, people like Odysseus and Penelope and Telemachus. When I look back on those happy days with Eva in Greece, I'm filled with nostalgia and love. I honestly cannot think of another pleasure quite like the pure joy of walking in Greece and talking about Homer with my dear friend, Eva Brann. Thank you.
That was beautiful. Thank you. I'm Paul Dry, and today I'm going to talk about Eva's asterisks. In telling you about these asterisks of hers, I hope to give you my sense of one of the ways Eva went about writing. In 2019, Paul Dry Books published Iron Filings or Scribblings. It was the first of Eva's last 3 books, in all of which she deployed the use of asterisks to introduce, often in mid-sentence, a thought that might ride against the current of the sentence in which she placed the asterisk. To explain its use, Eva included, quote, a note on the symbol, which is followed by an asterisk. Here is her note. This symbol signals a comment, printed in smaller font, expressing a collateral or adventitious notion of the sort that wreathes itself about actual thinking. If I put these often merry divagations in foot or endnotes, who'd have looked? I wouldn't. The note is signed E.B. The cover of this book, Iron Filings or Scribblings, displays an image of iron filings arranged around the north and south poles of a small bar magnet. Eva constructed the image herself. It also appears on the book's title page. And the format of the table of contents visually conveys the notion of balance. Eva had the titles of the first 16 essays set on the left-hand page and the last 17 on the right-hand page, thus leaving the pages slightly unbalanced. She did not tell me why she arranged them like that, so it's for us to try to figure that out. While this use of asterisks was new with Iron Filings, earlier books had shown her pleasure in balancing of her thinking. For example, take the titles of her 2 books of aphorisms: Open Secrets, Inward Prospects, Double Think, Double Talk. Both these titles employ a forward-leaning slash to separate their 2 phrases. And these separate phrases each seem to want to pull against themselves. For example, how can a secret be open or a prospect inward? And in the second book of aphorisms, I ask myself if the second think in double think and the second talk in double talk is more of the same thinking and talking or different from the initial act. As you read Eva, you realize that the play of words is full of merriment and revealing too. But what is revealed? In accounting for the title Double Think, Double Talk, she suggested that her way was to let herself be ready to come to a position about something and then to allow for the arrival of its antithetical complement. The phrase, quote, antithetical complement, is of course Eva's. This double vision or second sighting, as she calls it, I'm quoting her here, sometimes is a translucent tinting of the superposition of another domain. Sometimes it is a simple sense of the potent alternative or a sudden surrender to the claims of the other side. Close quote. Who can write so clearly and compellingly about the experience of thinking? As I've worked on this recollection of Eva, I've asked myself this question. By quoting her so much, have I evaded my task today to give you my thoughts about our friendship and the working relation we had as author and publisher? Well, I hope not. Those of us who spent time with Eva in seminars, in preceptorials, over coffee, at meals, on the telephone, via her writings, in exchange of letters, in travel, working on administrative matters, translating texts, we learned that as she expressed her thinking, Eva helped us to express ours. As her publisher, I always had an excuse to call her, though an excuse was never needed. Working on her books was an ongoing education. It also was an abiding merriment. Her books are there for any and all to take in hand and read, and so to experience the happiness that joining Eva in thinking produces. Thank you.
So there's going to be a little overlap between things that other people have said and things I said. Sorry about that. Some years ago, after one of our Saturday morning translation sessions, I asked Eva if she had ever considered writing an autobiography. I asked because in recent years, she had started to reveal more and more about her childhood in Germany and her youth in Brooklyn, and I found her stories fascinating. Peter and I heard about her adventures as a Macy's shop girl, about the pleasure she took in driving her father around Brooklyn as he made house calls, but also about the foods that still disgusted her, because when she was a little girl in Nazi Berlin, Jews were allowed to shop only at the end of the day, when all that was left in the stores was horse meat and half-rotten vegetables. When I asked, why not get these things down on paper, Eva demurred, but then a week or so later handed me this little tome. It turns out that she'd already produced an autobiography. It's got a title, I Came Across the Ocean. It's got a sort of publication date, January 10th, 1944. It's even got a table of contents. True, it stops when she's 15 and is told from a 15-year-old girl's point of view, but what it lacks in coverage, it makes up for in this. If you squint in just the right way, you can already see Big Eva in the stories and the storytelling of Little Eva. There are beautiful descriptions of her house and garden in Berlin. There's a hair-raising account of Little Eva in her cellar under aerial bombardment, and of her feeling exhilarated as well as terrified at being there. There's older Eva's capacity for blunt appraisal in young Eva's vivid portrayal of the Gestapo who torment her family and other Jewish families during their long train trip through Germany. And also in her wry account of Lisbon, which is supposed to be a beautiful city, but where no one seems to be in the city because he wants to be, but only because he wants to be somewhere else. Above all, there's a correspondence between young Eva's growing excitement about going to America and subsequent sober assessment of the place, and older Eva's rational, if sometimes a little Pollyanna-ish, love of and appreciation for her adopted country. Which leads me to the next thing I want to talk about. The only time Eva ever got mad at me. At least, I think it's the only time. We were engaged in our usual pre-translation schmooze and kvetch fest. I'm not sure what the particular occasion was, but I happened to say at some point that she, Eva, seemed to like the United States more than a lot of more recent refugees. An innocuous enough observation, I thought, but not to Eva. With uncharacteristic sharpness, she insisted that, though she had no problem at all with refugees, she was not, nor had she ever been a refugee. She hadn't fled from Germany. The United States wasn't a refuge for her. On the contrary, her coming to the United States was wholly positive, even though she had left behind a beloved city, house, and city. I'm sure I nodded and backpedaled as fast as I could, but I must have looked unconvinced because no sooner had I gotten home from our session than the phone rang. It was Eva who wanted to talk with me some more about my comment, or rather take me to task, one of those American idioms that, by the way, Eva would have loved to think about. I don't remember much about the content of that conversation. What I do remember is my face getting very warm and my desperate desire to get off the phone as quickly as possible. It was all very strange. Eva and I, and Peter too, had disagreed about a great many things over the years, about how to translate this or that word or phrase or sentence, how to construe this or that Greek particle or circumstantial participle, what items to include in a glossary or introduction, what we should think in the end about Alcibiades or the Eleatic stranger or the relation of Plato to Aristotle or Martin Heidegger for that matter. I had also worked through 2 of Eva's book manuscripts, plastered them with comments, and discussed them, argued about them with her at length. Trouble was our business, negation and contradiction the very lifeblood of our work together. But this disagreement was different, and even I, who am sometimes slow about these things, had begun to realize that the sticking point, the rub, was not a word, refugee, but Eva's very identity. In any case, a few days later, I ran into Eva, and she said in that characteristically clipped tone of hers, "Eric, I wonder if I could have a word with you." We stepped into a classroom, and here roughly is what she said. If she had stayed in Germany, if circumstances had been different and the Nazis had not come to power, she was sure it would have been her doom to become a professor, maybe even a famous professor, and nothing would have been worse for her intellect and character than such a fate. Being boxed into a specialty would have narrowed her mind, and having the status of professor in Germany would have brought out her tyrannical side. Eva was dead serious about this point, and I thought I had finally understood what she'd been driving at all along. At the same time, I also thought I had finally understood the great attraction she felt toward the American Southwest, not just Santa Fe and its amazing sky, but the whole vast western landscape, including Colorado cowboy country, where she went regularly. Eva was at her core not an expert, but an amateur, that is, a lover. And she could be fully herself only in a world where she was free to explore unknown territories and free, too, to make mistakes. Here in America, and especially here at St. John's, she could be part of a genuine community of learning, be part of a world where playfulness and seriousness really are sisters, where trying out new thoughts and watching them self-destruct with a little help from your friends is as natural as breathing. Here she could avoid being fenced in, avoid becoming a defender of turf. She could be at work and stay herself, following her intellectual fancy wherever it might lead. She could, in her own way, in her reading and thinking and speaking and writing, be at home on the range where the deer and the antelope play, unfenced under vast blue and nearly cloudless skies. For Eva, being part of such a community made up of students, faculty, alumni, and many others, and based on our official program of studies, but extending far beyond it, it was not to be in a refuge. It was paradise itself.
These are comments from David Carl. I want to thank Ms. Silver for her invitation to speak at today's service and to express my regret for not being able to join all of you in person. However, I feel it's very much in the spirit of the college, as Eva always lived and taught, that our students come first, whether they're 18 or 80. So this weekend, I'm leading orientation activities for our new graduate students in Santa Fe instead of being here with you. I hope she would have approved of that ordering of priorities, for I can think of no better way to celebrate Eva's life and ongoing legacy than to sit down with a group of students new to St. John's, open a battered copy of the Mino, and contemplate once again that question at the heart of what we do at the college: what is virtue? My memories of Eva start, of course, with the many books we read together over the years, from Plato to Marilyn Robinson. We led seminars together in Santa Fe and Annapolis, Reno and Athens, London and Madrid. The place didn't matter, because once the books were opened in front of us and we turned expectantly to hear the opening question, Eva helped turn the seminar table into a world of its own. "What makes war beautiful?" Eva once asked at the beginning of a seminar on the Iliad, and we entered together into the world of Homer. "Why does she put up with him?" Eva asked with her infectious smile, referring to Milton's Eve. I remember seminars on the Republic and the Odyssey during which our students couldn't believe this wasn't Eva's first time reading these works. Such was her joy of discovery during our discussions. That she was the author of Homeric Moments and the music of the Republic inevitably stunned students who found her open-minded excitement for every idea shared around the table incompatible with someone who might have been considered an expert in other academic settings. But Eva never wanted to be an expert on anything other than the act of thinking and the art of conversation. Under her guidance, conversation really was an art, and she was the artist from whom I learned the most. I remember once, during a seminar on the Iliad, discussing the moment when Athena stays Achilles' hand as he's about to strike down Agamemnon, a student asking if anyone today could believe in such forms of divine intervention as were apparently commonplace among the Greeks. Rather than bristle at the naivete of the question, Eva turned it into a remarkable moment of potential discovery, asking the student, "Well, where do you think ideas come from? If we're more sophisticated today than the Greeks were then, do we have a better account of where ideas come from than they did?" And of course we don't. Where do ideas come from? I've asked myself that question countless times since she first raised it in my presence. I know that in many cases my ideas came from her. Ideas about how to read and interpret a particular moment in a novel by Charlotte Bronte or a poem by Emily Dickinson. Ideas about how to galvanize recalcitrant students. Ideas about how to get the most out of every opportunity to sit down and read and discuss a book with other people. But it wasn't just the books she taught me about, how to read them, how to learn from them, how to make them a part, and often one of the best parts of our lives. It was also how to be a tutor, what it means to be a member of the St. John's faculty. In that sense, I suppose she was something of an Athena to my young tutor Achilles' self, offering guidance, counsel, and wisdom. And I didn't just learn how to be a tutor from Eva, I also learned why the work of a tutor matters, and how it could be so incredibly fun, truly joyful work. I've never known anyone who more perfectly embodied a combined respect for the seriousness of what we do with a playful delight in the enjoyment of doing it. I asked her once, when she was still a young woman in her 80s, happily leading seminars, if she thought she would ever retire. "Good heavens," she responded, "why would I do that? What could I possibly do with my time that would be better than this?" About books, the college, and how to be a better tutor, I learned a lot from Eva, but the most important thing I learned from her is this: a true, honest, sincere, unapologetic, and unembarrassed passion for what we do together at St. John's. Eva took endless delight in this passion, and for me, it was the most contagious thing about her. We once did a week-long seminar on love, reading selections from Plato, Stendhal, Shakespeare, and Alain de Botton. In the midst of that class, she announced, with that telltale, mischievous twinkle that everyone who has ever been in the same room with her would instantly recognize. "You know," she said, "teaching is the most erotic activity." All pedagogy is erotic because it involves the teacher helping the student fall in love with things that are worthy of their love, which is to say, worthy of their time, energy, and attention, worthy of giving their best selves to. And this is how I think of Eva, the tutor who always gave her best self, and in so doing, showed others the tremendous rewards to be had when we did the same. This is what she taught me and what I remember about her most.
Spring, winter, summer, fall for Eva Brann. Here's to the little girl with a bow in her hair, a nanny, a chauffeur, and everything fine. Here's to that girl looking up at the sky, New York, sun sparkling, buildings of glass. And to the professor who taught her that Homer was golden and all that gold could be hers. Then to the broken shards she studied to match the times she loved in the books she read about those shards. She would be wanted throughout the world for her writings, her talking, her advising, her mind. Yet what she wanted only and most was a place where rivers of students could call any time and ask the meaning of life. And that stays. Thank you.
I have to apologize in advance for the quality of my voice. But my voice therapist said that if I talked softly and close to the microphone, that I could be heard. I came to know Eva Brann over the course of more than 60 years. In the early 1960s, I was a young student, and she was a young tutor, one of only 4 women on the faculty at that time. I never had her as a tutor, and probably never spoke to her. Tutors in my mind at that time were some exalted race of human beings with whom one did not have casual conversations about the weather or recent movies. Eva was an important person on campus. Even if you didn't know her, you knew about her. And what we knew is that she demonstrated intellectual excellence among an intellectually excellent faculty. Her presence, her capability, was an inspiration to the young women of the college. I actually got to know Eva in the 1990s when she became the first female dean of the college and served 2 terms. I was on the board of visitors and governors at the time and was privy to her reports, both public and private, on a variety of educational and student matters. She demonstrated prudence, temperance, compassion, and justice. Also thoroughness. She actually went back and checked on my college transcript. So she found out what a mediocre student I had been. But even a mediocre student learned some things. And one of the key words burned into my brain from my time at St. John's was megalasuke, great-souled. And that was Eva Brann. In the 2010s, I got to know Eva on a more personal basis when she would come to my house out near the Blue Ridge Mountains for alumni seminars. And then she would stay overnight after the seminar, and we would just hang out and talk about the weather or recent movies, or about how she had to keep her home address secret because students would show up on her doorstep unannounced, uninvited. They wanted to talk about Kant. Who knew Eva would be fun to hang out with? But she was. When I first started offering alumni seminars for, quote, a day in the country, maybe half a dozen people showed up. After Eva became one of the co-seminar leaders, participation grew tenfold. We had 50 to 60 alumni drive 1 to 2 hours on a Saturday afternoon just to have a seminar with Eva. Eva held countless alumni seminars across the country over many years. When asked to do something for the alumni, she always said yes. The Alumni Association not only made Eva an honorary alumni, they elected her to the Alumni Association Board of Directors, where she actively served for several years. To say she was popular among alumni would be an understatement. She was adored. She was not only brilliant, but she was wise, warm, wonderful, a source of joy. She was a rock star. Eva never married or had children. She devoted her life to St. John's College, to the program, her colleagues, the students, and the alumni. She embraced all of us with her whole heart. We were her family, and we are her legacy. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Barry, that's Gretchen. Eva was, and still is, my oldest friend. We were blessed with her inspiring warmth, her view of what friendship means, and her very being. For me, the blessing began suddenly, instantaneously, in 1959, when I wanted to ask her a question. So I climbed through the window. I didn't go to her address. I climbed through the window of her office at the Institute for Advanced Study in Princeton, where she was a visiting professor at the time, and I was a postdoctoral fellow. I've actually forgotten the question, but it's clearly an important one because it had the obvious consequence of my friendship with Eva. We, that very summer, she went off to Greece to work in the American Agora excavation at Athens, and so why not? I went to Greece too, and the minute I arrived, she gave me a mission. I was to be her spy, and I was commissioned by her to go to Mount Athos, which is a mountain in the Athos peninsula of northern Greece. It's a place where no females are allowed, not even female animals, no electricity, no cars, no trucks, no tractors, but it's replete with monasteries and monks. And I was to go and come back with a thickly described commentary about what I encountered there, which I did. I went there and I reported back. Now, thinking of her as, I must say that I'm completely in tears over what everybody has said about her up till now, and sort of memories keep coming up. And one of the memories I had was the three of us. Eva, Shlomo Pines, who was a great scholar of Islamic and Jewish philosophy, and I, the three of us, spent a stretch of time in London, and what we would do every night was go to the theater, every night. And our idea, well, to do that, by the way, we had to take the cheapest seats, otherwise it would be unaffordable, but we would go to the same play every night until we felt we understood it or were bored by it. Eva made the call about the changes, and once we were either understood or bored, we would go the next night to the next play. I mean, Coriolanus, I remember, Lion in Winter, and so on. That memory is just one of many memories I've had with Eva. For example, the two of us were in Kyoto and for a summer, and she visited us, and we talked about incessantly and wonderfully talked about the temple gardens that we were trying to sort of get into our central nervous systems. And when we were in Paris, she visited us in Paris, about which Gretchen will tell.
Eva always knew how to ask the right questions. And I realized that this little piece is also about forms of recognition. But when Eva was about to visit us in France in 1988, we tried to think of a worthy expedition to take her on. It had to be wonderful. A mutual friend who knew her because he'd briefly been a tutor at the college told us we absolutely had to take her to the prehistoric cave at Lascaux in southern France. But it's been closed to the public for decades, we told him. No matter. He called the Ministry of Culture and got us permission the next week. Here's the story of our descent to the underworld with Eva. As we wait in the rain for our guide, Eva asks us if we would recognize the people who painted these caves 20,000 years ago. Do you think we would know them as us? A very grumpy old man comes and unlocks the gate. He leads us through a formaldehyde footbath to disinfect us, and then down steep metal grill stairways. At the bottom, he turns off his flashlight, saying we must become dark adapted. The blackness is sudden, velvety. Somewhere water drips to a pool. As we stand there, bewildered and blind, the man tells us that the cave was discovered in 1940 by 4 schoolboys. He admonishes us to keep quiet. Our time below is limited, he says. Until we emerge, he will be doing all the talking. In the chamber of the bulls, 5 or 6 bulls lead each other into the depths of the cavern. The first animal we meet, the bull closest to the exterior, has a droopy shape and 2 long, straight, improbable horns with blobs at the end. The whole beast looks saggy and off somehow. Our guide tells us to keep this one in mind. Except for that first misshapen animal, throughout the cave, the sureness of line and texture is astonishing. The cavern's own projections and recesses are used to play into the volumes of the painted forms. Sometimes a hollow in the rock is reverse shaded to give the optical illusion of the bulging side of a cow. 5 deer swim across the river, their heads raised to keep their muzzles above the water, their antlers graceful and precise. A horse falls off a cliff, the cliff being a natural outcropping of the rock. The horse is upside down, legs stiff in the air, ears back, mouth whinnying in panic. Down another passage, again in total darkness. Then our guide tells us to turn around as he lights up a larger cavern. Everywhere, on every surface of the folded walls and ceilings, cows, bulls, goats, deer, horses, bison, dancing, billowing like clouds. This is the Sistine Chapel of Lascaux. Eva, Barry, and I are all in tears. Seeing how moved we are, our grumpy guide suddenly gentles. Finally, he takes us back to the first animal in the cave, the saggy one with strange horns. He leads us to recognize that that is not a poorly drawn bull, but a well-drawn bearded man wearing an animal skin and costume horns. The apparent clumsiness is due to the way this ritual costume drapes over the human form. This is the shaman. Up into daylight again. When I get my voice back, I ask him how long he's been taking people through the cave. I retire soon, he says. I've been at it for 47 years. Later, back in our hotel, in a booklet about Lascaux, I find a picture of our guide tending some machinery for measuring the humidity in the cave. His name is given as Jacques Marsal. At the beginning of that same booklet is a picture naming the 4 boys who discovered the cave in 1940. Jacques Marsal was one of them. I think back to Eva's question, which she posed a second time as we were making our descent on the metal grillwork stairways. What if one of them were coming out, one of the cave painters? Would we recognize him? Thank you.
I'm reading the remarks of Steve Crockett, who regrets being unable to be here with us this afternoon. When she was 14, Eva wrote what she called an autobiography, I Came Across the Ocean. It's only about 75 small pages long, handwritten, but very full. There's learning an early backyard lesson in Mosaic law, living through what she calls the adventure of the Allied bombing of Berlin, seeing occupied Paris through the windows of a locked train heading away from Germany, trading her stale bread for oranges from Spaniards impoverished by the Civil War, learning about Lisbon from getting lost in it every day, being taught by American missionaries on American-bound shipboard the Star-Spangled Banner, her first encounter with Francis Scott Key, and arriving in New York City in 1941 by dawn's early light. That lesson in the law, when she was 6, her mother offered her and her brother Billy strawberries and milk under a tree in the garden. She had to wait till her brother got there, and she was getting angry waiting. A green caterpillar fell from the tree. Heaven sent, she says. She thinks red and green looks good together, and a young boy needs meat. So Billy's dish has red and green in it. But then her mother says Billy doesn't feel well, so Eva can have the dish. The lesson, as Eva put it, not to do unto others as I would not have them do unto me. As the ship pulled away from Lisbon, Eva thought, funny thing about this Europe, it's like a problem child, always getting into trouble, yet anyone who knows it loves it. But she also wondered, what will America be like? Near the end of her little autobiography, she answers, I discovered America's history. It's the story of a country growing upwards, not down, and always fighting for its ideal. I conclude with the wish that whatever I may be or whatever I may do, I may be able to fight, or better, work for life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness for myself, for everyone. But was America as lovable as Europe? Not in its pop culture, except for baseball, fast food, casual dress, baby pictures, Dutch apple pie, and more. Late in life, she says Americans are really a wonderful people, full of surprises that impeach every prejudice. And her example is another food story. She's in an airport, and at a nearby table are a couple, rhinoceros-backed, she calls them, with 4 empty boxes, once full of medium-sized pizzas, plus breadsticks. Gross, she thinks a European would say. But then she sees that the couple are practicing chess moves out of a book of classic moves. Gross my eye, she says. A few years back, she concluded she did indeed love America. And why? Who's going to hang me for writing what I think? What better, more lovable, and more decent fellow citizens could I ask for? What continent from sea to shining sea is more hospitable and grandly beautiful? Where else can a college like mine come into and stay in being? And what would the next destination, afterlife, be like? She once wrote that she felt a sort of obligation to imagine possible afterlives, because it would be embarrassing to wake up after death in a venue that was absolutely strange to her. Her fond acquaintance of her later years, William James, helped here. Consciousness could be like steam from a kettle. Turn the kettle off, no steam, no afterlife. Or the brain could be like a telescope, an instrument that allowed consciousness to see through from somewhere to somewhere else. But how many consciousnesses? Maybe just one, looking through many telescopes. But the one would not be named Eva Brann. Or after death, would we hear the sound of the Logos? Or at last know what music meant? May we always have nearby her delight in seeing more in us than we saw, in seeing a question where we saw none, and in doing what she once called mental double takes. There were so many such delights, so welcome, so needed after the dark beginning in Europe.
Eva's legacy is large. It is the example of a life well lived. We at the college share with her the pursuit of the good through the study of great books. We take part in the persisting life of the intellectual community she helped to shape. Eva's interest, both in the college and in the greatness and the troubles of her adopted country, never flagged. In her last days, Eva talked about all these things, and about herself, too, about her early life in Berlin, her parents, and her family's escape from Nazi Germany. As Eva reviewed her life in the last months, she pronounced her judgment. As she acknowledged, she was never hesitant to make judgments. She would have done nothing differently had she had the chance. She had disappointed her parents somewhat, she knew, her mother, who had done everything right, Eva said, in getting the family together out of Germany. Her mother wanted one thing from her. It was easy to guess, a grandchild. When I pointed out that, well, for you, there was no lack of kids, she agreed heartily. It was her father, she said, who sparked her interest in philosophy. He had talked with her about Kant on walks in Berlin when she was a child, too young to understand much, but not for her interest to be piqued. As her father reminded her, Eva could have done many other impressive things, but the college provided her with her true and most treasured home. She described her interview for the position of tutor as love at first sight. She loved the books, the very American character of the college, the student and the students. She had complete confidence in her mentor, Jacob Klein. She knew she was fit for every responsibility she undertook at the college, including that of dean. Still, she surprised me a bit when she told me that to consider how to live well meant to consider how one would govern. Living well was, for her, no matter of self-expression or personal satisfaction. She was, she assured me, perfectly happy. That is, she was perfectly happy as long as she could read, think, write, and influence the lives of others for the good. Eva and I became friends while we taught together for more than 20 years, I lost track, as summer classics partners. We began with a class on knights, as in Sir Gawain, Chaucer's Knight's Tale, and Shane. Shane was a real favorite. We read it later, too, in a cowboy novel, Summer Classics Week. Eva admired men of Aristotelian virtue, the sort that formed the romance of the American frontier. At first, I left our choice of offerings up to her. She had, after all, generously agreed to do a week with me. I wanted especially to learn from her way of interacting with students. Since we were on different campuses, Summer Classics provided the means. After the first couple of years, we negotiated a bit. The Cornish trilogy, her choice, was a bit of a risk, I thought. Out of friendship alone, she agreed to read Montesquieu's The Persian Letters with me. She did not fail to communicate her distaste. Throughout these classes, I delighted in observing her wonderful way of acknowledging insights, however well or awkwardly presented, and helping participants develop them. She always homed in on central issues in the text with no fanfare or self-importance, and she was beautifully restrained when dealing with people whose contributions she found, to put it gently, unhelpful. To cap off every week of co-leading, we had a family meal together, occasions in which she took an interest in my children as keen as in her students, as well as continuing the never-ending conversation with me and my husband about books, contemporary issues, and, of course, the college. While my son was a student here, Eva talked regularly with him, often reporting back to me after one of their coffee meetings. She referred to him as your splendid son. Later, he spent more time on his letters to her than on anything else he wrote. She was excited, too, about the work my daughter was doing. These attentions are a small set of examples of all that Eva did for and with her friends. At the end of every conversation we had, including the last one, just days before she died, Eva urged me to come back, saying, "We must continue the conversation." I will continue to do my part.
I'm glad to be here. There were quite a few tripping hazards. My name is Kimo Mackey, and I'm from the Annapolis class of '76. I had Eva for freshman seminar and mathematics. My enchantment with her started then. Academic challenge and playful banter was an irresistible combination. About 15 years after graduation, Eva and we reconnected when she gave a seminar in Seattle. Remembering how much she enjoyed sailing, I invited her to go sailing with us in Puget Sound. And so Eva began visiting our family in the summers at our home on Bainbridge Island. During those visits, there was no agenda. There were no required readings, no seminars, no lectures, and no notes to be taken. As our children would say, we just hung out. Someone else earlier said something about hanging out. Yeah. I finally figured out what it meant. Anyway, weather permitting, there was always sailing. With the tiller in her hand and her eyes sparkling, that's been used before, she'd declare she was in heaven. She was without question one of the most romantic sailors I have ever known. She told us stories of wonderful cruises she had made with fellow tutor Bert Tomes on Chesapeake Bay. She told us stories. Her descriptions made Bert's boat sound like a small yacht, when in fact we learned that it was a tiny day sailor with no cabin, no berths. So Eva had to sleep on the cockpit floor with a tent pulled over the boom. After one sail on our boat, I mentioned that it looked like we could go sailing again the next day. She exclaimed, "You mean we can go sailing more than once?" During these summer visits, Eva and I discovered that we both shared an interest in cowboy literature. That led to our introducing her to friends in Montana who managed a large cattle ranch. Eva was fascinated by how hard their entire family worked, how they did most of the work on horseback, and how they spent their evenings talking around the kitchen table. On the way to the airport, after her first visit to the ranch, she told me, "These are real cowboys." She charmed our friends as she had charmed us, and she continued to visit the ranch on her own for several years to come. When we were unable to spend time together on boats or cattle ranches, we did so virtually by sharing books. She probably read 10 or more books to every one I read, but she insisted that she loved the books I sent her. The sailing, the cowboys, and the book exchanges were the backdrops to our growing friendship. At the core, we just talked while driving, while sailing, while doing the dishes. She was as eager to talk about our children and our family's business, and even about the concerns of someone she had just met, as she was to recall memorable events of her own life. And such a St. John's enthusiast, she thought it was the perfect college for our children and for all our friends' children. She told the children how much St. John's would benefit if they attended. Well, she was pretty hard to resist. When we learned that she had received the National Humanities Medal and had dinner at the White House with President Bush and his wife, Laura, I asked her to describe George Bush in 2 words. Her instant reply was, "very fit." Yeah, what, for office? No, just physically fit. Anyway. A few years later, after receiving the medal again from President Obama, her 2-word description for him was interminably charming. A final fond memory is her story of the Greek yogurt. As a young archaeology student, she worked one summer on a dig in Greece, where she lodged at the home of a local Greek family. She often shared meals with them and became close. One night she came home late, tired and desperately hungry, and opened the fridge to find something to eat. Seeing a bowl of yogurt, she took it out, and it was so delicious. She devoured the whole bowl and went to bed. The next morning, she woke up to find the house in an uproar because someone had eaten the family's yogurt starter, a treasured possession that had been used for generations. She said the family understood it was by mistake, but she was not sure if they ever forgave her. My guess is they did forgive her, because who could resist? She said 5 minutes. I think I did.
I want to thank you all for joining us, and especially thank the speakers and the musicians for helping us to remember and honor Eva. We'll have one more musical piece, and then afterwards, we invite you all to join us in the Mellon lobby for a reception with refreshments. And there will also be a mic and microphone available if others of us would like to share some of our memories of Eva. And now I'll invite the musicians to come up.